Thanks for staying with us. Time now for African News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, peacekeepers and Christian militia battle each other near Bangui Airport. Anti-Balaka fighters try to prevent Chadian forces evacuating terrified Muslim civilians. Also, amidst more attacks in the north by Islamist group Boko Haram, we speak to one analyst about the conflicting views on the Nigerian military's success in the battle against extremism. And we hear from our correspondent on the eve of Libya's vote for the 60 people to be responsible for drafting the country's new constitution. First up, panic was sparked at a refugee camp near Bangui on Wednesday after heavy fighting broke out near the airport. Passengers arriving in the Central African capital from Cameroon were forced to disembark amidst the crackle of gunfire as Christian militia battled Chadian soldiers trying to evacuate terrified Muslim civilians. Nicholas Romain has more.
It was a strenuous day for the MISCA African forces. They clashed with the anti-Balaka groups who put up barricades around Bangui Airport. The fighting left dozens of people wounded. The anti-Balaka had also protested on Tuesday. They rejected a statement by the presidency calling on Muslims who'd fled to return to the country. The anti-Balaka's rivals, the ex-Seleka, said they are confined to their barracks.
Our men cannot go out into the streets with weapons and carry out attacks. All the violence that has happened in the city, it's because of the anti-Balaka.
Some websites say the Boko Haram group in Nigeria has vowed to fight the anti-Balaka to avenge the deaths of Muslims in the Central African Republic. The ex-Seleka deny any link with the jihadists.
We have no contact with Boko Haram. We are from the Central African Republic. We don't need foreigners to support us. We are in our own country.
Only 600 kilometers separate northeast Nigeria, where Boko Haram operate, from the north of the Central African Republic. Some analysts say that if the government in Bangui doesn't restore law and order soon, then it's possible that Boko Haram could carry out attacks in the country.
Well, the Nigerian military says that several Boko Haram extremists have been killed by soldiers after the insurgents attacked a town in the northeast. The town of Bama was targeted on Wednesday morning. It's about 60 kilometers from Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State. Now, that's at the center of the Islamist uprising and saw about 106 people slaughtered by militants over the weekend. Well, this week, Borno's governor warned the government that the extremists were better armed and better motivated than the army. The military, on the other hand, says it is winning the battle against Boko Haram. Well, for more on this, I'm joined from Lagos by analyst Opeyemi Agbaje. Opeyemi, thanks very much for joining us. Now, what do you put this conflicting take on the success of the offensive against the insurgency down to?
Well, I think there's some truth on both sides of the debate. I think it is true that Boko Haram appears to have received new funding, seems to be better motivated in recent times. On the other hand, in support of the military's position, it is indeed true that Boko Haram has never defeated the military in conventional warfare, in face-to-face battles. Every time there's been a face-to-face confrontation, the military seems to have prevailed. Boko Haram are a guerrilla group. They attack when the soldiers are not around, they slaughter civilians, and then they flee. And the military then pursues them. So there's some truth, I would argue, on both sides. The critical question is, Boko Haram seems to have received new funding, and that's where the military should be and the government should be investigating. Where is the money coming from?
Now, you're saying the government should be doing more with elections up next year and public dissatisfaction with the government's handling of a number of issues beyond just Boko Haram. All this mounting, Abuja must really be feeling the pressure to be seen to be getting a handle on the fight back against Boko Haram.
Yes, the government clearly is under pressure. They declared a state of emergency. That emergency initially for 3 months was renewed. There were some initial successes. But now it seems, like I said, that Boko Haram is now on the offensive once again, and they've widened the scope of operations across Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states, and they're killing people now in 50s and 100s. So it's a much more drastic situation. But beyond Boko Haram and the Northeast, the government is under pressure from probably many other sections of the country, except of course, that it's the Boko Haram that has taken to terror. I think the fundamental issue is that there is dissatisfaction over Nigeria's federation for different reasons from different constituencies. In the Niger Delta, over the oil, over control of oil resources. In the most of the north, over loss of power since 1999. In the west and parts of the east, they want greater regional autonomy. So there are fundamental discussions that Nigeria should be having about the state of the federation.
Thanks very much. Opeyemi Agbaje there joining us from Lagos. In other news, South African police have arrested a Pakistani man accused of injuring several people after he opened fire on a crowd of protesters in the town of Cullinan. Now, he reportedly had been trying to flee mounting anti-immigrant violence. Township residents had been rioting and targeting foreign-owned shops in protest of the murder of a 10-year-old boy allegedly fatally beaten by a Pakistani shop owner. Well, several immigrant business people have been forced to flee the area amidst rising tension with local South Africans. Frustration rooted in widespread poverty and a lack of jobs has led to a rise in xenophobic attacks in poor areas.
Our kids are dead. Our sisters are in hospital right now. You understand? They are running the businesses here. We need them to go back so that we can take our businesses back.
We are sick and tired of them. Yes. And one other thing, we promise you guys, if they come back again to our location, we are going to kill them as they've killed our kids.
It's better they take us back to our countries. They deport us back to our countries. It's better we die in our own soil instead of dying in a foreign soil.
Supporters of a French national who's been in prison in Cameroon since 1997 have celebrated news that he could be out in just a few days. Michel Atangana and Titus Edzoa, a former rival to President Paul Biya, have always claimed to be victims of a political vendetta.
17 years behind bars in a cramped Cameroonian jail cell. French national Michel Atangana has always maintained his innocence. In Yaoundé, his family were ecstatic to hear of his possible release.
How to express my joy? It is enormous. We are thrilled that he will be released after all this time in prison. The family is absolutely thrilled. We are very moved.
Atangana and former Secretary General of the Presidency, Titus Edzoa, were jailed on charges of embezzlement in 1997. Both are now due to be freed. It comes after a presidential decree on Tuesday ordered
the complete reduction of sentences remaining to be served for persons convicted for embezzlement and whose stay in prison has been more than 10 years.
Atangana first arrived in Cameroon in 1994, working as a go-between for French companies developing infrastructure there. 3 years later, both he and Edzoa were convicted for stealing more than €1.5 million in public funds. A close personal friend of President Paul Biya, Edzoa had just announced he himself was running for president. Atangana was to be his campaign manager. The men were arrested, faced expedited trials and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Cameroon is officially dubbing the sentence reductions a humanitarian act and part of the lead-up to the country's 50th anniversary of reunification.
On Thursday, Libyans will elect the 60 people to be responsible for drafting the country's new post-revolutionary constitution. But the vote will be held against a backdrop of national security challenges, coup threats, deadly tribal clashes in the south and assassinations in the east. And authorities have had limited success in reining in the disorder. On the eve of polling day, our correspondent takes a closer look at the hurdles still faced by Libya.
At a Tripoli suburb polling station, some final preparations for the constitutional elections. Despite weapons proliferation being an issue in Libya, the Election Commission are confident all steps have been taken to ensure safety.
I guarantee that weapons won't enter the polling stations. With regards to the voters, they will not be allowed to carry any weapons at all. On the signs, there are 3 things not allowed: carrying weapons, use of mobiles, and talking. Of course, the army will also be involved in securing the country as a whole, beyond the centres, in case of emergencies. But God willing, it will all be fine.
Sami Sharif, a candidate who withdrew from the electoral race, is unconvinced.
We all know the government is relying on the police and the army, but we know that they're not present. The security situation in Libya is not reassuring. Maybe some people believe that the proliferation of weapons creates a balance of power, but that's dangerous. The government talks about guaranteeing safety in slogans and speeches, but it isn't doing that in reality.
For political analysts, lack of security is less of an issue on voting day and more of how people have come to perceive it.
People have been preoccupied by security more than they have been following the electoral debate for these elections. So people are more concerned about kidnappings, thefts, stealings, bombings than they are about the candidates they're electing. There's a total sense of disenchantment towards the political process because of the violence that is occurring across the country.
This disenchantment may come to have an indirect impact on the constitutional process in the long term.
Well, that wraps up African News from me, but I will be back with more in about 45 minutes. Stay with us, though. We'll be back with more news and headlines from around the world. Take care.